Bhanu Swami Namane. Namaste Saraswati Gauravani Prasarane Namaste Srimad Bhagavatam Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Saraswati Gaura Bhakta Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama Rama Hare Hare. Srimad Bhagavatam chapter 19 verse 18. Purnam Varsha Sahasram Purnam Varsha Sahasram Vishayan Sevato Sakre Tatapi Chanu Savanam Krishna Kesu Bhajayate Krishna Kesu Bhajayate Purnam Varsha Sahasram Vishayan Sevato Sakre Tatapi Chanu Savanam Krishna Kesu Bhajayate Purnam Varsha Sahasram Vishayan Sevato Sakre Tatapi Chanu Savanam Krishna Kesu Bhajayate Purnam Varsha Sahasram Purnam Varsha Sahasram Vishayan Sevato Sakre Vishayan Sevato Sakre Tatapi Chanu Savanam Tatapi Chanu Savanam Krishna Kesu Bhajayate Krishna Kesu Bhajayate Purnam Varsha Sahasram Purnam Varsha Sahasram Vishayan Sevato Sakre Vishayan Sevato Sakre Tatapi Chanu Savanam Tatapi Chanu Savanam Krishna Kesu Bhajayate Krishna Kesu Bhajayate. Purnam, completely. Varsha Sahasram, 1,000 years. 1,000 years. My Vishayan, sense gratification, Sevata, enjoy, Asakta, without cessation, Tatapi, still, Sha, indeed, Anusavanam, more and more, Krishna, lasting desires, in sense gratification, Upajayate, are increased. Translation: I've spent a full 1,000 years enjoying sense gratification, but desire to enjoy such pleasure increases daily. Purport: Maharaj Priyati is explaining in terms of his actual experience how strong our sexual desires even in old age. Text 19, therefore I shall now give up these desires and meditate upon the Supreme Personality of Godhead, free from the dualities of mental concoction and free from false prestige. I shall wander in the forest with the animals. Purport: to go to the forest and live there with the animals, meditating upon the Supreme Personality of Godhead is the only means by which to give up lusty desires. And this one gives up such desires. One's mind cannot be freed from material contamination. Therefore, one is all interested in being free from the bondage of repeated birth, death, old age, disease. After a certain age, one must go to the forest. After 50 years of age, one should voluntarily give up family life and go to the forest. The best forest is Vrindavan, where one need not live with the animals. We can associate with the Supreme Personality of God if one never leaves Vrindavan. Cultivating Krishna consciousness in Vrindavan is the best means of being liberated from material bondage. For in Vrindavan, one can automatically meditate upon Krishna. Vrindavan has many temples, and in one or more of these temples, one may see the forms of the Supreme Lord as Radha Krishna, Krishna Balaram, and meditate upon this form. As expressed here by the words Brahmanyanaya, Ajaya, one should concentrate one's mind upon the Supreme Lord, Param Brahman. This Param Brahman is Krishna as confirmed by Arjuna and Bhagavad Gita. Param Brahma Param Dhamma Bhagavatam. Parama Bhavavan. Krishna and his abode Vrindavan are not different. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, Aradhya Bhagavan Rajesha Tanaya Saddhama Nandavanam. Vrindavan is as good as Krishna. Therefore, when someone gets the opportunity to go to Vrindavan, and if one is not a pretender but simply lives in Vrindavan and concentrates his mind upon Krishna, one is liberated from material bondage. One's mind is not purified, however, even in Vrindavan. If one is agitated by lusty desires, one should not live in Vrindavan and commit offenses, for a life of offenses in Vrindavan is no greater than the lives of the monkeys and hogs there. Many monkeys and hogs live in Vrindavan and they are concerned with their sexual desires. Men who have gone to Vrindavan but who still hanker for sex should immediately leave Vrindavan and stop there. Grievous offenses to the lotus feet of the Lord. There are many misguided men who live in Vrindavan who satisfy their sexual desires, but they are certainly no better than the monkeys and hogs. Those who are under the control of Maya, specifically under the control of lusty desires, are called Maya and Mriga. Indeed, everyone in the conditioned stage of material life is in Maya and Mriga. And it said Maya and Mriga, Daya Kapshatam, Anva Dhavat. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu took sannyas to show his causeless mercy to the Maya Mrigas, the people of this material world who suffer because of lusty desires. One should follow the principles of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and always think of Krishna and full Krishna consciousness. Then one will be eligible to live in Vrindavan and his life will be successful. Translation: spent 1,000 years enjoying such gratification and desire to enjoy such pleasures increases daily. Therefore, I shall now give up all these desires and meditate upon the Supreme Personality of God, free from the dualities of mental accomplishment, free from false prestige, and shall wander in the forest with the animals. So, King Yayati spent 1,000 years enjoying. Still, he did not give up that desire. So, in the Vedic conception, or the Varnashrama conception at least, by experiencing enjoyment within the gunas in a regulated way, one should eventually surpass those enjoyments. So people in Kamagun, by regulating that to some degree, will surpass Kamagun and come to Rajagun. And then they enjoy Rajagun, and then they restrict that somewhat, and they progress to Sattvagun. And they enjoy Sattvagun, and if they succeed there, then they go to Jnana Yoga. So there is a provision for enjoyment of the senses within this system of Karma Yoga, Artha Kama. And with moksha, we get to Jnana. Therefore, there should be a natural progression provided we restrict to some degree the senses, but still one can enjoy. This is the whole idea. However, we see that sometimes this doesn't work. So in this case, it would be Yati Maharaj, who was apparently following this whole system of Grihastha life. He was a king also, and he knew the rules. So, still, after 1,000 years, I still do not give up the desire to enjoy. I can't progress beyond the Rajagun. He cannot advance further. Very difficult, even after 1,000 years. So what to speak of no regulations at all? This is another type of justification. Let us enjoy as much as we can in the material world. Then, after enjoying so much, then we will renounce. With no regulation. That doesn't happen at all. And in fact, we see in Bhagavad Gita generally, if we don't have any system of regulation, we sink downwards. So we find in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna describes how these people, the demons, they sink lower and lower and lower in the modes of nature until they're no longer human beings, and they become animals. They enjoy as much as they can, but they never tire of that enjoyment. So this is the sense in which Bhagavad Gita describes kama as being like unsatisfied, like fire. So fire burns, you put fuel in the fire to satisfy it, it burns up that, and it wants more fuel. So like that, we enjoy with the senses, and then when we're not satisfied, we want more enjoyment, and more enjoyment, and more enjoyment. So there's no regulation, of course, we sink downwards in the gunas instead of going upwards. So in Karma Yoga system, we allow the enjoyment, but we restrict it a little bit. And the hope is that gradually people progress upwards, and they restrict more and more and more until they come to Sattva and they lose interest. So that is the hope Here we find that it didn't work too well with the Yati Maharaj. After 1,000 years, he still finds he's got this attraction for enjoyment. And he was a great king. And that is why, particularly in Kali Yuga, this gradual system of elevation through the gunas by enjoyment is not recommended. And that is why Krishna in Bhagavad Gita at the end says, Sarvagama Parijajal Mamikam Sharanam Vraja. Give up all these karmas and just do this worship of me. So generally we have these two processes, gradual process through dharma, etc., karma, yoga, varnashram, and the other is just do bhakti. And they're simultaneously going on. But in Kali Yuga, particularly, this is not recommended that we go through the gradual system. It does not work. Right? So we have here Yati going through this system. It doesn't work too well either. After 1,000 years, he's still caught. So what to speak of the people in Kali Yuga? They follow the system and they never get into the gunas. Similarly, in the Bhagavatam, the first canto, Narada Muni tells Vedas that you've written all these Puranas for the people in the gunas. So you tell people when Tamaguns worship Lord Shiva, by worshipping Lord Shiva, eventually they become purified. And then they rise up in the gunas, then they can worship Brahma and Rajguru. Then they can worship Brahma for some time, then they can do Sattva, they worship Vishnu. Very good. But then our is not going to work in Kali Yuga. People are not going to advance upward like this. They're going to stay at the bottom and sink downward. They're not going to advance. They're going to stay in the modes of nature. They're not going to go beyond the modes of nature. So if we simply follow the gradual system, it's not going to work in Kali Yuga at all. They will never come to the process of bhakti at all. So therefore it says, give up all this, and you simply follow the instructions of Bhagavatam and worship Krishna. That's all. No dependence on this other system at all. So, therefore, the idea of restricting the senses gradually does not always work, particularly in Kali Yuga. However, we also know that if we do not restrict the senses, we can also not perform bhakti. So in the Bhagavatam, it is said that qualification for bhakti, and this is mentioned and quoted in the Nectar of Devotion, the qualification for bhakti is not to be too attached to material enjoyment. So if we're too attached, we cannot practice bhakti. So there is some qualification of detachment from material enjoyment. Otherwise, it's very difficult to practice bhakti. Yes, bhakti is good, but at the same time, if we're too much in the enjoyment mode, therefore difficult to practice. So there must be some sort of sense of restriction even within bhakti yoga. And that is why we have things like regulated principles, etc. to cause a minimum amount of control along with the practice of bhakti. So, the uncontrolled sense gratification, of course, is condemned completely. Better than that is varnashram control. But that doesn't really work as the principle means in Kali Yuga. We can't depend on that. So therefore, the primary process becomes bhakti yoga for everybody in Kali Yuga. The process itself leads to detachment from all things. So in the second verse here, Vyati is saying, I will meditate upon the Supreme Lord, and I'll become free from dualities, nirvana, nirahankara, free from ahankara and pride, free from the dualities of material nature, free from material identification. I will simply wander around with the animals with the forest. In other words, he's indicating taking vanaprastha life and meditating and thinking of the Supreme Lord at all times. So this is one of the processes of bhakti to meditate and think of the Supreme Lord, as engagement of the mind in thinking of the Lord. So, of course, when we think of the Lord, meditate on the Lord, we can also worship the Lord in the mind. And in this way, we become free from the desire for enjoying the material world. So in other words, through the process of bhakti, we develop detachment. As I said, we need some minimum detachment to begin with, not too attached to the material world. And through the process of bhakti, we develop more and more detachment. That's also described in the first canto of Bhagavatam. By the practice of bhakti, then the gunas begin to get destroyed, and one gets established in sattva over the lower gunas, and then one goes beyond sattva. So, in other words, the process of bhakti destroys all the attachments to material things. So definitely we have to give up the material attraction, but a lot of this takes place through the process of bhakti itself, rather than a dependence upon varnashram system, rules and regulations, etc. So therefore we have this whole process of anartha vritti taking place. The anarthas are desires, ahankara, ignorance, karma, etc. All the material attractions that we have, and due to good karma we may get material benefits, etc. So due to the process of bhakti, the anarthas are destroyed. We lose our desire for enjoyment. Our karma is either enjoying or suffering or destroyed. Our false identity is destroyed, etc. So therefore, this verse says, when you're done with your ahankara, one becomes free of ahankara, false identity. The ignorance is destroyed. And therefore, we do not see in terms of this is nice and this is not nice. Our desires and our hatreds disappear completely. So the process of bhakti naturally brings about complete detachment to everything in the material world. However, that is not the goal of bhakti at all. That's the goal of jnana, yoga, to become detached from everything and get liberation. The real goal of bhakti is more perfect concentration on the Supreme Lord. And by that, this naturally takes place. It does not naturally take place if we concentrate simply on Brahman, the impersonal aspect. To worship that Brahman, of course, is very, very difficult, as Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita chapter 12. It is full of suffering. Why? Because meditating on Brahman means we can't meditate on anything because Brahman has no form. So all we have to think of, I am that, I am Brahman, I am Brahman, I am Brahman, which is rather an abstract philosophical conception. And that's what we have to deal with. And that's our meditation in impersonalism. So it is very difficult to concentrate the mind simply on that. To do that, one has to give up all one's activities, physical activities, one has to give up sense activity, etc. Very difficult to do. So, that meditation on Brahman to attain Brahman is very, very difficult. On the other hand, if we meditate on the form of the Lord, the qualities of the Lord, or the activities of the Lord, it becomes very, very easy. Particularly because if we meditate on Krishna, he is most attractive. He is so attractive that even the demons become attracted to him, and they cannot avoid meditating on him, even if it's in hatred. So, therefore, that is why Krishna is recommended as the object of worship in Kali Yuga, because he's the most attractive, and he can attract our minds. So, if we have the form, qualities and activities of Krishna, and we meditate on him, by absorption in Krishna, we surpass the gunas, we surpass desire, we surpass ahankara and ignorance, etc. Naturally. And this allows our attraction for the Lord, meditation on the Lord, to become perfect. When we have less and less gunas and less ignorance, we can more eagerly meditate upon the Supreme Lord. So therefore, as a person advances in bhakti, and he destroys the gunas and the ahankara, etc., the process becomes quicker, easier, because he gets less anarthas to deal with, and his attraction for Krishna increases all the time. So when one comes to a ruchi or a sakti or bhava, then it is very quick progress, because one naturally becomes absorbed in simply thinking of the Lord, and these material things become less important or completely absent as we go on. So, therefore, the cultivation of attraction, meditation on Krishna, and attraction for Krishna becomes stronger and stronger, and naturally the material elements disintegrate. So this is the process of bhakti yoga, and it naturally gives rise to this detachment. Yayati Maharaj is complaining here that 1,000 years of following the system and we're half to life and nothing happened. I'm still attached. I can't progress. It was a very slow system. In his case, he was a king. So it didn't work too well for him. That was the gradual system. So therefore I said, let's renounce, and I'll take a Vanapasta life, and I'll meditate on the Supreme Lord, taking the process of bhakti. So, of course, the simpler process is not wait until 1,000 years. He can't do this process at the beginning of his grihastha life, or even before his grihastha life. The process of bhakti is so flexible that one can do it at any stage of life. And therefore, Prahlad says when you're 5 years old, you can do bhakti. Or even before that, Komara, which means actually before that. When you're a baby, you can do bhakti. Also, very flexible system. So, though the varnashram system is recommended as an assistance for becoming detached, it is always safer to, along with that, do the process of bhakti. And then, in case we have problems like this, we can quicken the whole process by doing bhakti, and we won't fall into this position of ending up with 1,000 years and still no effect to the varnashram system. So therefore, the varnashram system cannot operate independently of bhakti also. But it's simply a matter of degree. Now, in the normal varnashram system, of course, it is automatically worship of the Lord, but it's worship of the Lord along with worship of devatas and everything else, pictures, etc. So there is a little bit of worship of the Lord. But we don't really call that bhakti, because it's a minor aspect. It's something anga out karma yoga. So as well as that, we should do bhakti as a separate sadhana, along with the karma yoga system. That is, we do hearing, chanting, remembering, etc., worshiping of the Lord, associating with the devotees, etc. If we do that along with this varnashram system, we get a much better effect. So we can do the two things simultaneously, the karma yoga system and the bhakti yoga system. So many of the great kings here do this, like Dhruva or Ambarish. In fact, Ambarish, he actually did more of that and less of the karma yoga. He became very disinterested in the whole karma yoga system, and he had all those ministers do everything for him, and he just did bhakti. So therefore it's described that he would engage all of his senses in cleaning the temple, meditating on the Lord, serving the devotees, decorating the deities, etc. He would completely absorb himself in the process of bhakti. So we can do both processes, or we can even do more prominence of bhakti. Or, in Kali Yuga, we can just do bhakti also, and there's no criticism. And since the whole varnashram system is more or less disintegrated, there's not much opportunity for many people to practice varnashram. So therefore, even if we don't have that system, we can simply go on practicing bhakti. And it becomes successful. However, in that bhakti yoga, the success is due to Nam Sankirtan, chanting the holy name. This is the mainstay of bhakti in Kali Yuga, by which it becomes successful. And therefore, we have this Lord Chaitanya quotes from Brihadaranyaka Purana. Harinama, 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 Kevalam. Only chant the holy name. Only chant the holy name. Only chant the holy name in Kali Yuga. This is the main process of bhakti is the main process, and in bhakti, Nam Sankirtan chanting the name is the main process. Right? So therefore, our bhakti becomes successful in Kali Yuga by emphasizing the chanting of the name. This does not mean that we reject the other processes of bhakti, but chanting the holy name is the primary process. It does also not mean that we will reject the Varnashram system, karma yoga, etc. It can be, but it's not the main emphasis. It's very, very secondary. Our main emphasis is going to be on bhakti and chanting the holy name. Yeah? So that's why it says only chant the name, only chant the name, only chant the name, because this has to be our primary process of spiritual development. Everything else is secondary. Yeah? So we may or may not do the Varnashram system, but at least we have to absorb ourselves in chanting the holy name. And this is how we get perfection. What is perfection? One, we get free from the dualities of material nature, free from the ahamkara, free from the karma, etc. Free from material attachment. But more important, we get complete attachment to the Lord, which is manifested finally in bhava and then prema. So that's the real goal that we get out of chanting the holy name. But we get this other effect also. So this is, we say chant the holy name, chant the holy name, chant the holy name. But, condition is there. Everybody can chant the holy name, and it's the Yuga Dharma for everybody. But if we want to get prema, then we have to chant in a certain way. So we do have conditions there. That is, you get the Bhava knowledge. Who's the supreme Lord? Therefore, we have to have Shravanam, we have to have devotee association, we have to know the Bhagavatam. We have to know the difference between Krishna and everyone else, between Devatas and Supreme Lord, between Krishna and other forms of the Lord. We have to know pure bhakti, or Uttama bhakti, as opposed to Karma Mr. Bhakti, or Jnana Mr. Bhakti, or Yoga Mr. Bhakti, or minor bhakti, where it's only part of something else, Varnashram system. So we do need some knowledge. This knowledge is part of bhakti, it's not jnana in the normal sense of jnana yoga. So, therefore, yes, Harinama, Harinama, and Keval, that's the process for everybody. But we want to get prema, and then we do have these conditions. Knowledge, sadhusanga, understand about bhakti, understand the condition of the Supreme Lord. Then we can chant purely, and we can progress nicely to prema. As I said, we do not reject other processes of bhakti. It is impossible to simply chant the holy name if we want to get prema. We have to have sadhusanga. We have to have hearing. If we don't hear anything, how can we get prema? So we have to have the hearing process, hear the Bhagavatam. We have to hear the Bhagavatam through the devotees of the Lord. That at least we have to do. And then added to that we do have deity worship, archery as well. So these processes all assist the process of chanting the holy name and help us, it's easier for us to perfect the name. So in this way, Nam is most important, but the others act as assistants to that, to perfect the holy name. And this is where we get our perfection. And whatever else we want to do in terms of Varnashram, we can do that also. But it's supporting the process of bhakti and chanting the holy name.
Also in Bhakti Yoga, there may be chance of follow, as we say, jnana also common mistakes. Even the Bhakti is supposed to be about the universe, there will be chances of falling down and making mistakes.
No. Well, as Krishna says in Bhagavatam, even if you make mistakes in bhakti, the Lord's not so concerned about that. And the only rectification is more bhakti. Continue the process of bhakti, continue the process of chanting. If you do jnana and you make a big mistake, you're finished for yes. You have to start from zero and start all over again. If you make a mistake in karma yoga, then you have to start your prayaschitas to counteract your sins or whatever like that. And it's quite complicated. So the process of bhakti is simply do more bhakti. And the Lord is not so much concerned. But if one commits a rocks, then we can decrease the bhakti or destroy the bhakti, depending on the seriousness of the so therefore, someone has to be very careful not to commit aparadhas, particularly Vaishnava aparadha.
Why do people think, oh, let me go to bhakti and do mistake? Not again to bhakti.
Well, we can do that, but then there's the seventh offense of the holy name committing sinful activities to the strength of the holy name. So if we use bhakti to do more sinful activities, then again it's an offense, and then again we destroy the bhakti. So when it talks about abhichet sudarasharo, that doesn't mean we're continually using bhakti to commit sinful activities. We're trying our best, and sometimes we make mistakes. That's all.
Let us see, Prabhupada quoted from verse like Pantashuddha Bhanu. He quoted this here. So normally Prabhupada would say that in the forest we should steal the animal. But animal is Prabhupada quoted. He should steal the animal.
Well,
because
I'm not sure.
but see, in the forest,
Which means go to the forest.
yeah, means he's staying, there is an association in the forest, he's staying in the animal, those are the lower moods.
Yeah.
And he is to circle of the moods.
Yeah.
How will it help him?
Yeah.
There's no association there.
That is why Prabhupada says you go to Vrindavan. And you may not have animals there, but you some devotees. that forest is better. This is the traditional Varnashram, where you go to the forest and put on bark clothes, live in a hut, eat roots and fruits, and you don't see anybody. So as far as Vaishnavism, that in itself is not very good because you don't have devotee association, etc. But we find people like Bharata did that. They follow that system, but he was already a devotee anyway, so he is worshipping the Lord anyway. But it's not so favorable for others. So the main element of Vanaprasada is detachment from material sense gratification. So emphasis is on tapasya, the normal system. And then when you're finished with tapasya, then it's sannyas, then you concentrate on the Lord. Okay? But as I said, for the Vaishnava, this simply good tapasya is not really so good. So promise to go to Vrindavan. And there you get association of devotees here and chant and engage yourself in worshiping the Lord.
Also, Prabhupada said one should be qualified to go to Vrindavan. Make mistake there, they become mindless.
Yeah. So that's the other problem. And go to Vrindavan, but if it simply goes to Vrindavan and then enjoys, that is also not good. So better that we practice previously to going to Vrindavan or whatever. So that means throughout our life we should actually practice. And when we do renounce, then we'll be fully engaged in service.
The purport Prabhupada says that if someone has a desire of self-gratification, so he takes birth as like a horse and dogs in the Vrindavan. Even in the Mudra Mahaprabhu, it says that if someone just stay in the Vrindavan, he might have desire because of the power of the Dharma, he go to Vaikuntha.
That's provided we don't commit offenses, I think. If we commit offenses, then I don't think that applies anymore.
That's why, because he said it because of Dharma, he stays still in Dharma. Because of the power of Dharma, still he go to Vaikuntha.
Yeah.
I don't know why he said this segment.
Well, it is like there's certain stories like the accidental bhakti where you fast on Ekadasi and you get good results, or there's a story of the mouse who nibbled at the wick in the temple and burst into flame and lit up the deities, and then he went back and the mouse went back. So that's the power of bhakti. But it may not happen in all cases, and we can't depend on that as human beings for our advancement. So there is great power in living in the holy God, and it's actually one of the angas of bhakti, like chanting the holy name. So if you chant the holy name once, then you're created in the Dhamma and everything like that. So just to think of the Dhamma or glorify the Dhamma or see the Dhamma, that's also very, very great. And we can do that in many cases. But it's not that we simply depend on that for our spiritual advancement.
Also, in olden days, when one of us goes to the forest, there will be other one of us also. They had associations.
Could be. But the number of Vanaprasas is actually very few as far as I can see. But then the other thing is to go to a holy Dham. That's another type of practice. So a lot of the people would go to a place like Vrindavan, etc. If they're empresses, they probably go to Varanasi or something associated with the Mayavadis or something.
But see, Prabhupada taken this in this chanting holy name, it's like asking service from the Supreme Lord, correct? And see, we have some other sampradaya also. those who take in this like ocean deity, that is like primary process they have
Yeah.
taken, not a chanting the holy name. But can you say that that serving the student is the primary, and we are desiring this service while chanting. So their secondary process became the primary process. Secondary process, all of the ocean deity became the primary process for them.
It's not the Yoga.
Yeah, it's not legal. But we are desiring service. Service also is like after chanting, we are designing service, and this has become the primary process for us.
Yeah.
But they are doing only primary process. But they are
Secondary.
chanting. They are doing secondary, but it became primary for them.
Yeah. So,
question is that what will be the destination for them?
well, no problem. They do bhakti, they can advance, but it's much more difficult, the advancement, and it's not for everybody. So in other words, they cannot say everybody should go out and worship the deity like this. They can't do that. So it's only for a few people. And then again, as I said, the main process is we depend on the chanting of the holy name is the main process, and they're not doing that. So therefore, it'll be more difficult. But still, it's bhakti, so they can advance.
Because our goal is to serve him.
In any case, all types of bhakti are service to the Lord.
But already they are serving.
They're serving, so that's good. But because they're not chanting the holy name, which is the Yuga Dharma, therefore it's a little more difficult. But we don't reject the other processes, but we make the primary process chanting the holy name. They may also chant the name of some sort, or use mantras or whatever like that, which has the name also, but it's more restricted.
Maharaj, Kali Kali Nama Rupi Krishna Avatar, does it mean that in the previous ages the holy name, Krishna is different from holy name?
No. All the processes of bhakti are always there, but certain processes become prominent. So in Satya Yuga, it's meditation on the Lord, and homa and treta, and the worship of the deity, and worshiping and chanting the holy name of Kali. The processes of bhakti are always there, and even Harinam is there, but it's not the main process of those particular persons.
Then why saying especially Kali Yuga? Nam Rupa.
Because in Kali Yuga, nobody's qualified for the other processes at all. That's all. To emphasize the fact that the only process in Kali Yuga is chanting the holy name. Aparadha is an impediment for expression in the sense of bhakti is so powerful in other processes. Why does bhakti remove the mentality of any aparadha from performance? It will, definitely, and the aparads are part of anartha vritti, so anartha vritti takes place. But if one intentionally commits aparads continually, this becomes a problem and helps destroy the bhakti, so therefore the anartha vritti doesn't take place, because anarthas destroy the taste for bhakti, and you do less bhakti, and therefore there's less anartha vritti taking place. So it becomes problematic if one commits a lot of aparads, because then bhakti becomes very weak, and one's ability to perform bhakti becomes less. So therefore, the anartha vritti doesn't take place. So that's the problem.
It's like a Madhya Kunda Shochavat.